WNST when it comes to talking about the Stanley Cup championship that I saw with my own eyes on Wednesday night out in Las Vegas, and into the day on Thursday and into the day on Friday. And I guess I landed Wednesday. This guy landed Thursday halfway through the game, but was there at the end to see history made. He is one of the Caps historians, one of the few guys that's written books about the Washington Capitals over their 45 years of existence. I don't know if there's going to be a Red Rain or a Red Rising Part 2, but Ted Starkey was a shotgun and sitting a foot away from me when they threw the gloves off and went to the corner to celebrate a Stanley Cup championship. Ted, if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I don't know if I would have believed it, man.
I know, it was definitely a surreal kind of evening. You just kind of didn't expect what was going to happen, and in the third period, you kind of wondered if it was going to come back to Washington for a game on Sunday. But they persevered. Smith Valley had the nice diving goal, and a couple of minutes later, Lars Eller sealed the deal, and they got a chance to win and did it in pretty quick fashion too. 4 wins in a row. First time Vegas had ever lost 4 games in a row, so it was an impressive finish.
Tell us about your book from years ago and what it encompassed and where it came from, because I would think as a jumping-off point for several members of the organization and for the architects, your book did a nice job. Your book's a little dated at this point, obviously, and the freshening up period, but I would wonder where the jumping-off point would be for you, because much like when I wrote about Ray Lewis in the first book, Ray Lewis was a big part of the second book, and the story of him being drafted and getting the first championship was all there. Certainly for Ovechkin, the building blocks of him being a Hall of Fame player was a foundational part of your book, but the missing ingredient was this championship. And I don't know where it starts, man, and I've been watching it. People ask me if I could write a book on the Caps. I don't really know the turning point. I would say it probably began with hiring Trotz and his sort of rocky journey through this thing over 4 years to getting to a Stanley Cup. I think leadership's where it's at, and obviously the McPhee-McClellan thing and wherever that is, these are sort of the overarching parts of all of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Red Rising began really in 2003. We talked about how the Capitals, they lost to the Lightning that year, and Leonsis was not very happy with the team because the building didn't sell out for the decisive Game 6, and they basically decided to press the nuclear button and just rebuild. And, they had a terrible year the next year. I mean, the irony is you probably had more Caps fans in the building on Thursday than you did some of the home games at the end of the 2003-2004 season. But then, you draft Ovechkin, you put in some nice pieces. George McPhee did a nice job getting the team to a certain point. I think where the book leaves off in 2012, the team was close, but they kind of step back a couple of years. They had the upset over Boston in the 2012 playoffs. Then in 2013, they lost to the Rangers. In 2014, they missed the playoffs. And you kind of felt like the team was kind of degrading a bit. And I think when Brian McClellan came in, I think you really saw them, put an emphasis on defense. They signed Niskanen and Orpik. He made a couple of nifty moves. He really went for it a couple of years, obviously getting Shattenkirk last year at the deadline. But he was always true to his core. He made sure they signed Oshie this offseason. They lost 5 players. They were pretty significant, but he made sure that the core of the team stayed together. And, this year, they weren't quite as good as the team last year, but, neither was anybody else. And, in the playoffs, they outlasted Pittsburgh. They outlasted Tampa Bay, and they were able to take apart George McPhee's fine work at the end. And, it basically, I think it just turned back when they changed the general manager, because I think that's where you really saw a change in direction, and you really got a fresh vision of what this team needed, which I think George did a good job building the team, but I don't think he could quite get them over the hump.
Ted Starkey is our guest. He can be followed at Ted Starkey. He's also at Newsdays, an internet news manager there, but really a Life for Caps fan. And, I wrote about my journey and kissing the Stanley Cup in Las Vegas and bringing it to Baltimore. And anybody can go out and read my blog at WNST.net. And obviously, we're trying to bring the Cup to Baltimore and waiting our turn and, through the parade and all the rest of that. And I'm doing my Dear Orioles series. But for a guy like you and a guy like me that have been at this so long, I mean, it's nice to see 20 and 25-year-old people. I've got jackets. I've got starter jackets older than most of the fan base, right? So the notion of Pat LaFontaine and winning against the Islanders and Kerr and Prop and Hextall and all of that era with the Flyers and then the Penguins. And one of the reasons you're a Caps fan, you hate everybody. It's kind of like being an Orioles fan. You've lost to everybody at some point, right? And you've never won, and you've never been able to come back and ring the bell and kiss the ring and get drunk and jump in the fountain and make out and do other things that they were doing over the weekend. But your background, my background, I wrote about my background. It comes very, very honestly in loving hockey. And I think when your team wins, you do remember your mom, your dad, the rink, if you skated, if you didn't, the first time you went, the first time you met Gino Briaco, the first time your dad got your Clippers program, the reason you love hockey. And even if that's 3 weeks ago because you think TJ Oshie's cute, right, and this is something you're new to, the Caps need you to and hockey needs you to. This is no time to say, where's the bandwagon? Begin and end, but we all fell in love with the game, right? And I don't think you would be flying across the country back and forth, nor would I, if we just didn't love this crap, right? And love the trophy and want that feeling that we had down on the ice amongst this team. And, a guy I've known for 30 years that means a lot to me that I wrote about, but I know the whole thing meant a lot to you.
Oh, it did. I mean, I've been going, my dad took me to my first game in 1980 back at the old Cap Center in Landover, and I remember the first playoff series when they got beaten soundly by the Islanders. I was there for the Easter Epic. I was there for the Dale Hunter game. I was there for the 4 overtime get lost to the Penguins.
In other words, we spent about 6 years of our lives together in April and May.
Exactly. I mean, it basically, it was interesting because this playoff was so different than any other in Caps history because it seemed like whatever had been done to them in years past, they were doing to other teams. They came back from the 2-0 deficit against Columbus. They won the last 2 games against Tampa with shutouts, like a couple of years ago against the Rangers. It was just kind of surreal to see. Even Game 5 with all the Caps fans there, it was reminiscent of when the Red Wings won in Washington in 1998.
Let's talk about that for a minute because we were out there the week before, and some Caps fans came out and made a party of it, and Ted brought 200 people out. But what we saw there at Game 5 was sort of this descending of Caps Nation. And honestly, look, I was out having a pregame good luck beverage with JT the Brick Turnauer, my friend from Fox Sports Radio, who does my show here, and he does radio in Vegas and out in the Bay Area. And, I said to him, dude, there's a lot of red here. And he's like, our people aren't going to give up. We're not going to give in. We're Vegas strong. Blah, 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 blah. A third of the crowd. It felt like a Super Bowl, Ted. It felt like a third of the crowd was one way, a third of the crowd was the other way. And some of the folks were in Vegas just looking to watch the cup get hoisted, right? Like, literally, there was even some in-betweeners there for the novelty of the Super Bowl nature of lifting a cup, which I was too. My wife and I, we got in a limo 15 years ago and drove to New Jersey and paid scalper prices to see the Devils raise the cup against Anaheim because we love hockey and we wanted to see the cup get raised. So I think you get a little bit of that tourist aspect too, that hockey nerd fan thing. So there was a little bit of that, but it felt like a Caps home game a lot of the way. And I'll tell you what, I watched the replay the other night on Saturday night when I got home and was trying to sort of exhale, and it felt like a Caps game on TV. It was crazy, right?
Yeah, no, I finally saw the broadcast over the weekend, and you could definitely hear. I mean, you could see the photos even, when they're hoisting the cup, you could see all the red in the lower bowl. I mean, it was, I think what it is, you had all these Caps fans who, not only the diehards, but some of the people who had come back, had been Caps fans, but had moved out. I know a lot of people there were people from California and Idaho and Arizona and all out west. And there were people coming from D.C., in Baltimore, and they coming from the East Coast. And it was kind of like a culmination of all this year of frustration, finally getting a chance to go to a game. And not to mention, had there been a Game 6 on Sunday, those tickets were going for nearly $2,000. It was actually cheaper to fly out to Vegas, get a hotel, and get tickets for the game than it was to try to get a ticket for Game 6. So, a lot of fans, I think, took advantage of it, and, they kind of felt the series was going their way. And, after 2 periods, it was a little iffy, but at the end, they pulled it out, and Caps fans who went out there will have something they'll remember forever.
We're chatting with Ted Starkey. He's one of the Caps historians. His book, Red Rising, is still available out there. It's a nice little, preface, I think, for everything that's happened here in the modern era over the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know if you are writing an addendum, but certainly picking up the pieces for all of Alex Ovechkin in whether or not he's tied to Boudreau, to Oates, to Hunter, now to Trotz in this relationship, but getting the most out of the Russian machine has always been a very, very difficult proposition, and there's a long line of coaches that have been sent by the side of the road with this supernatural talent that they couldn't find the right goalie, the right defense, the right pieces, the right third line, the right fourth line, the right motivation for him, the right line mates for him, the right comfort level for him as a young and rambunctious type, as we were all reminded of on Saturday when he was doing keg stands into the cup. At some point in the Nationals gear. But all that being said, Ovechkin stands solely in the middle of all of this. And I love that I was at the team party late at night, and there was the Conn Smythe Trophy sitting in the middle of the room with him. And it was like a wedding with him, and he sort of directed the cup. And I think he's had it every waking moment and probably damn well deserves it at this point. And he'll bring it back like, I don't know, some point after, whenever he's done with it, right?
Yep. I think it's funny because, there was always a criticism over the years for not being a playoff performer or not caring. And, anyone who suggested that he didn't care about winning the Stanley Cup should pretty much have their answer from the last couple of days with just how much he's glowing. And, you just seen the photos of him, obviously, around D.C. and in the postgame in Vegas, just how happy he was. And, I think the one thing I think this year, too, with Barry Trotz, it's, with his contract kind of up in the air, I think he could have been really nervous about it, but I think he took a very relaxed atmosphere to it. I think this year you saw Barry really took a kind of laid-back attitude to the team, and he didn't let a lot bother him. And I think that really translated to his team, including Ovechkin. I don't think Ovechkin really let the criticism bother him, the fact they were in tough parts of the series, because, he had that big Game 7 goal against Tampa. He had a big goal in Game 5 against Vegas, and I think he kind of relaxed, and I think the whole team kind of relaxed, and they didn't let external things bother them, and I think that's one of the reasons they were so successful.
Well, you mentioned big goals. I don't even know what the hell a big goal was, right? I think I could go up and down the roster and give you a dozen guys who scored big goals in the playoffs. Literally, very, very memorable goals. I was pimping Brett Connolly all along. It turned out it was his shot that, sort of knuckleballed, and I had targeted him as being a hero, and it turns out it's Lars Eller, who had been a hero many times over. I think you start to talk about where Kuznetsov is in all of this, and Burakovsky at various points, and DSP, and, just sort of on and on. I think the hero was whoever was on the ice at the moment, and hope he will also have to stand the test of time in all of this, because there were a lot of guys outside of Ovechkin and Kuznetsov that in any other normal circumstance you might look to on the Conn Smythe side of things.
Yep, and I think, I don't know what the final total was, but I believe it was 19 different players scored a goal for Washington in the postseason, which is close to an NHL record. You basically have pretty much everyone they dressed. Even Brooks Orpik got a goal in there. And, you just saw that not only were the top line really producing, you saw, the guys like, Eller and Smith-Pelly and Beagle and all these other guys, they were all producing. They were all playing well. And, against a team like Vegas, Vegas had 4 good lines. Capitals had, 4 good lines, and their top 2 were better. And I think, that really made a difference. And, obviously, Holtby was tremendous throughout the whole playoff after he came in Game 2. He basically outplayed every goalie he saw. He outplayed Sergei Bobrovsky, who's won the Vezina Trophy. He outplayed Matt Murray, who won the Stanley Cup with the Penguins. He outplayed Vasilevsky, who's a Vezina finalist this year. And then, obviously, Fleury, who's won the Stanley Cup a couple times with the Penguins. He was better than all of them, and the team was better than all of them. I think every series, it's hard to argue the Capitals weren't the better team, and, I think the Stanley Cup title was well-deserved.
Ted Starkey is our guest. You can follow him at Ted Starkey out on Twitter as well. Are you doing a book? Or are you thinking? What do you think about doing here, Ted? Be honest. Listen, I don't want to pressure you, right? I have made this decision to write a book several times. I made a decision several weeks ago that when this Cup run was over, and I really did sort of envision them winning a title. I mean, I don't think there was ever a point where you've been with me in the last 2 months where you didn't think I didn't believe they could win. I mean, I've never been the naysayer on them, even when they were down 3-2 in the last series. But I know writing a book's like a whole different level of all of this, but I'm assuming you're at least on the bridge of considering it, right?
Well, it was funny. I had a book project in the works during the season, and it kind of got a little bit derailed because of the whole playoff run. But yeah, I would think there's a very strong possibility there will be at least a type follow-up type, if not a season in review type book coming in the near future. I just working out some details, but I would be surprised if there isn't. And there also could be the additional book, which I was working on before this all happened. It was pretty funny that you never know how the Capitals will do in April and May, and everything got put on hold in around the second week of April, and it's just now that I'm starting to get back around and tackle some of the projects I was working on about 2 months ago.
Yeah, where do we go here, right? Like, the Ravens won kind of quickly, right? And for me, it was a Super Bowl to have the Ravens, right? The first day they ever played football here against the Raiders, that was enough for me. I mean, I didn't want them to be 4-12 every year and stink and leave town and be a failed franchise the way like Jacksonville has been, or some of these other places where they've just perpetually struggled, Tampa, where it never really mattered. It's always mattered here, and I think that's a little teetering. In the case of the Capitals, man, like it never mattered in the beginning, and then it mattered a little bit. Boy, to see it like matter this much now when it's always mattered so much to me because I've loved hockey so much. I've tried to find a way to put that into words, that I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time with, whether it was the football coaches and Brian Billick and those people and the Marvin Lewises in my life. But certainly the Barry Trotz thing, I feel so good for him. I feel so good for so many people that, like you and I, that used to go down to the Capitol Center, and Ed Frankovic and everyone in his family that love the Capitals of that era, as well as the new people that, quite frankly, you need, as we're learning as Ravens fans, to fill in the fan base. You need to make fans in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s. You need black fans and white fans and left fans and right fans and east fans and west fans. And I'm telling you, man, I saw all of that going on. I left you guys up there in Game 3 to go down and watch the second period of Game 3 with my wife on the street because I wanted that experience for a period. I saw Sting in the street. I was out there with my son with Fall Out Boy. I really tried to milk it because, man, it's taken all of this time. Was it satiating for you? I mean, I saw you in the aftermath. You're such a straight-laced fellow and such a professional when it comes down to all of it that you didn't want to be seen kissing the cup and all that. I was a complete idiot, and I thought I was a complete embarrassment until I saw what Ovechkin did on Saturday, and now I feel like, what the hell? I probably should have kissed Trotzy on both cheeks and tried to lift him up or something. But, I mean, for you wait all this time. Was it as much fun as you wanted it to be, man?
Oh, absolutely. No, it was. I've been lucky enough to see the Cup awarded twice. I saw it in 2010 and 2013, and so I kind of knew what to expect at the end. But obviously, it was a little bit different because it was, obviously the team I've been following very closely for almost 4 decades. It's going to be interesting. You're talking about the Capitals in the long term. This will be a lot different than 1998 and 1999. I mean, I think the team is pretty good shape. The only big question mark they're going to have is John Carlson. And I think they'll probably, if he decides to leave, they'll probably use Philip Grubauer to try to get a replacement. But this is still going to be a pretty competitive team. I mean, they're not going to be losing a lot of core pieces. They're going to be, pretty solid. The big difference is obviously they're going to have a target on their back next year. But it's not like they haven't had that before, just a little bit different. So, to see the TV ratings from Thursday, you saw, like in D.C., they said almost 1 out of every 2 TVs was on the game. Baltimore ratings were fantastic. And, it's just going to be the Capitals have always been really close to kind of cementing that number 2 place in Washington. They're not going to replace the Redskins because it's the NFL. But they're going to put some significant distance between themselves and the Nationals and the Wizards just in terms of, the local interest. And, being the first team to win a title in that town since 1992, that's going to carry a lot of weight. And, I think next year will be very interesting. They'll still be really good. I'm not sure they could repeat if things broke their way again. But, in some ways, after 44 years, it buys them a little bit of time. They can be okay for a couple of years, and people still remember 2018.
Ted Starkey can be found out on Twitter at Ted Starkey, as well as out at Newsday, as we sort of put this whole thing together here in sort of a retrospective way. It is astonishing that the year, and much like the Orioles, and I know I've talked to you about this, and you're a baseball historian as well, the 79 to 83 Orioles, they couldn't get there. Believe me, Boswell and I were talking about that in the locker room as we entered, passing Tony Robbins after they won the Cup. It's an incredible thing to put this core group of guys together, but even watching them flail around drunk in a fountain on Saturday, boy, you really get a sense of a brotherhood of something they built here during this era that really will sort of transcend that 10 years from now they still will be talking about this.
It's interesting, too. You go back and you talk to some of the players now, and they just talked about how last year losing to Pittsburgh was such a bitter disappointment. And instead of kind of letting that ruin them this year, they really kind of built on it. They had a slow start to the regular season, but, that's part of, playing 82 games and, it's a long season. And I think they really fed off that. Instead of being, letting it be a destructive kind of force, they used it against other teams. They used that anger and that hunger to really put together some great performances. They were in the amazing thing about this playoff run, there were 3 times in the playoffs they were in serious danger of getting knocked out. I mean, you had Game 3 against Columbus. They were shorthanded, and Columbus hit the post. They were inches away from being down 3-0. The Pittsburgh series, they could have easily lost that in Game 5. And obviously the Tampa Bay series, they were terrible in Game 5. They could have come out and laid an egg at home in Game 6, and we'd be talking about what the Caps need to do to finally get over the hump. But this team they were just so different than some of the other teams we've seen. They played with confidence. They played with confidence late. They didn't let little things bother them, as like teams in the past had. He gave up even Game 5. They let in that goal with a couple, less than a minute to go. Didn't bother them. They came out, played well in the third period, and got those 2 goals. And it's just this team is it was a little bit different, and it was nice to see them put together, like you said, like the '83 Orioles. Hockey is a little bit more random, I think, than baseball. Baseball, you can kind of, if you get those arms, your core starters to pitch well, you have a much better shot. Obviously, hockey, the equivalent of goaltending, but, the Stanley Cup playoffs are so random. And I think a lot of fans miss, you miss with the President's Trophy, you think the best team always wins. They don't always win, but... Yeah,
that's the NBA. If you want to know the ending, watch that.
Exactly. It's basically, like I always say, the best team doesn't usually win the Stanley Cup, but it's a team that just plays the best in the last 2 months of the year. Obviously, I think the Capitals are probably the best team in the league the previous 2 years. And, honestly, if you put them against this year's Capitals, maybe they beat them in a playoff series. But, this year's Capitals were just special. They just managed to not lose focus, and, they got the goaltending what they needed. They got the breaks when they needed, and everyone stepped up, and it was just a phenomenal playoff run.
He is Ted Starkey. He is my friend. He is the author of Red Rising and perhaps Red Rising 2, Red Rain, whatever it is. I'm sure the story will be fantastic. He's a true Caps historian and a lifer who's flown across the country with me, with Ed, and has been a part of the 3 Amigos. And my wife sat in nicely. And I tell you what, dude, when I went to the Blue Jacket, after Game 7, I went back to my favorite menswear store at an outlet in Orlando that I had been at during the owners' meetings, and my eye caught a blue jacket with a red silk interior and a red hanky, and there were 2 jackets. One was missing the red hanky, and I said, if I buy the jacket, can I have the one with the red hanky? They're like, absolutely. And I did not wear that to Game 1. If you look back at our pictures from you, me, and Ed on that 100-degree day, I'm wearing a white jacket. I went to the blue jacket in Game 2 with the red interior. Win Game 2, win Game 3, win Game 4. I break it back out in Vegas for Game 5. I will always credit the Blue Jacket because I'm superstitious like that, Ted.
Well, especially wearing a jacket on, in the middle of Las Vegas. Because it was definitely warm in the building. But, yeah, no, it was funny. You talk about the superstition. I wasn't sure if I was be able to make it for Game 5, and I had to kind of, once I knew there was a possibility they could clinch, I was like, well, I'm going to try to go. I'm going to go all the way out there just to see, see 2 periods of hockey and come back for Game 6 on Sunday, or, get a chance to go on the ice afterwards. And obviously, I was happy with the choice they made.
Well, right. I mean, you don't want to miss it after all of this, of course. So, hey, dude, rest up, towel off. We'll see what happens after all the parades and the dust settles and the Trotz debate continues and what happens with Carlson and where guys are going and restricted free agents and unrestricted free agents. There'll be plenty of time for that. But in the meantime, kiss the chalice, hoist the goblet, enjoy the cup. The Washington Capitals are the Stanley Cup champions. Ted Starkey will be chronicling it as he has done all of his life at Ted Starkey on Twitter as well as at Newsday. I'm out in the buy, a Toyota.com audio vault, 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Nasty at WNST.net finds me, and of course our morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life guarantee. Don't forget Maryland Jockey Club, our partners, and the Laurel entries in every morning newspaper. They are racing this weekend down at Laurel. Nice thing to do on a summer afternoon. And of course, you have all the betting available there, as well as a beautiful, revamped club area at Laurel. So check all that out in the morning newspaper as well as at the front of WNST.net. Any breaking news when the Orioles deal Manny Machado, or whenever I get my Dear Orioles series together, which should be by the end of the week, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday. He hosts the SSV on WNST. We will have post-Cup celebration and all that and more. I am out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are talking the suckiness of the Orioles, the mini camp of the Ravens, the aftermath of a Triple Crown and a Stanley Cup, and another Golden State Warriors title as well. Wow, lots of stuff going on, lots of stuff to get to. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.